Recording started.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 513. My name is Erik Nilsson, and with me today, I have my regular co-host, Matt Lunguth. Matt, today is Wednesday, May 27th, 2020. How you doing?
Erik, I am well. It's a somewhat cloudy but humid day in central Pennsylvania. How are you, sir? And what's the color of the bay?
I am doing well. It is in the 80s in California now, so we're in that warm summer weather, and the bay actually gets a hint of blue when we get this hot, sunny, bright weather. No more rain. It's going to be warm. Cherries were this weekend, so we went cherry picking. Cherries were excellent. So we are in the dead of summer, and we're coming out of the COVID blues, which is very good. So it's good. On the show today, we're going to be talking to Erik Hinderer. Erik is a network specialist. He's an SE, works out in the field. We're going to be talking about vSphere 7, NSX, networking, and how does that all come together? We got Kubernetes there, building out complex Kubernetes applications and the network fabric that's needed. So if you want to learn about networking, Erik's here, works out in the field. He's going to tell us what he knows about what's new in networking with NSX and vSphere 7 and Kubernetes. So Erik, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Erik. Appreciate it.
Hey, I got to say, if you're watching us on YouTube, or you're not, you should go over. Our YouTube channel is vBarbecue, VBARBECUE. Go check it out. Give us a subscribe and a like. And the reason you want to go today is that Erik has his guitar room. So he's in his office, and he's got some custom guitars hanging there. I got to say, Erik, how did you get into music, and how many guitars you got in there?
In the room here, there are a lot laying around the floor. On the walls, there's 6, and then on the floor, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A banjo. So banjo counts, right? So that makes 7, 7. In the room. Yeah.
Super cool. Super cool. Nice to see it. Nice to see it.
Yeah, it's always fun.
All right. Before we get to Erik, thanks for that little showcase of your room. I got to say, if you're on YouTube, you can see I've got a pinball machine in my home office, and I got a Atari Asteroids, which is actually a Raspberry Pi in the back end running a whole bunch of games. So lots of fun here. We get to share our home offices, get to see inside everybody's life a little bit when you come onto these things. On the show today, again, NSX, what's new there. Before we get there, let's just talk the conference. The VMworld conference is coming. We're excited about it. It's going to be online. It's going to be digital. I know we're going to do birds of a feather Zoom conversation. So we're going to be spinning up that. We're working with vBrownBag to spin up some of these community sessions online where everybody can come together and meet everybody in kind of like 30-person capped Zoom experiences. So if you've ever been to Usenix or some of the old conferences out there, you used to have birds of a feather sessions at night, which were kind of like informal, get together, drink some beer, eat some pizza, pretzels, whatever, and then just talk about, the subjects. Somebody would usually do a presentation. So very much like the vBrownBag sessions, community sessions, we're going to be doing that for VMworld online, but we're going to probably do them in the afternoon. Well, afternoon for us would be, who knows, all over the globe. But we are going to try to do those so that people can meet up and say hello and get reconnected every year like we do at VMworld. So we're going to try to do that this year as well. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll get to send out some pizza cards or something to all the V experts that are out there so that you can come on, meet people, say hello, have some pizza, get a shirt. So Corey's going to be busy mailing out those packages, but we're gonna do something like that. So that's coming together. Call for papers closed. I know Alistair Cook is still looking for sessions that we're going to fill up for the Birds of a Feather sessions. So go check out vBrownBag if you're interested in, being part of it, sharing what you learned, showing us your guitar room, whatever that is. I think that's a lot of fun. I think we can make this, from a community perspective, something fun, right? Like you can come see my pinball machines, you can come see Erik's guitars, you can come engage these birds of a feathers. You'll get to see in people's homes. Well, if they have homes, and if they don't, they're in their tents or wherever they live. right? All right, that's all I got for news. We're chugging through everything. vExperts are happening. Apps open up. I don't know what the app open up date is. Tony Foster, if you know when the vExpert app's up. We're trying to go hit over 2,000. That means we pick up another 100 vExperts. I know the vExpert pros have been busy in region, talking to people, teaching them about how to be a good evangelist and how to raise their game up a level. So hopefully you've done that. I know Erik does some podcasting on his own. So everybody should be doing this. I look at podcasting and evangelism is kind of like the modern day PowerPoint. So again, Matt is telling us in chat that apps are still open until January 1st. So if you want to be a part of the formal conference, you can go get online and submit.
I'm sorry, Erik, just a brief correction there. vExpert applications for the second half of
the
2020.
apps, vExperts, not the session.
Will open June 1st and continue through June 19th. There will be a 3-week period. We'll have voting through June 20th through July 16th, and then we'll have the awards announcements on July 17th. So again,
fantastic.
Applications will open for the second half of 2020 for vExperts on Monday, June 1st.
There it is, Monday, June 1st. Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. And I know that the sessions for VMworld were closed. So yeah, that makes sense. So, all right, chats are popping up all over the place. So let's get to our guest who's been patiently playing his guitar and I'm just jealous of your room, dude.
You should be. It's fun in here.
Right.
I got to say, it's a ton of fun having a room in the digital age now, where you can record through, Logic Pro X or something like that, and you can do this in 15 minutes, just sitting around. So it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to say, just before we hit the show, I have a Yamaha, I want to call it XBR, but it's one of these $6,000, $7,000 high-end keyboard because my son plays pretty good piano, does that. And we got the whole setup and it just collects dust, right? Because it's one thing to have all the gear. It's another thing to actually pull the time away to actually, do music and record it.
Well, it's got to be one of those things you do just because you sort of love to, I guess, noodle and sort of, doodle around in there. It's
right. Me, it's gaming, any kind of game, any kind of, old style pinball machines. I want to get there's a $4,000 original 8-ball pinball machine that I want to get. Had Fonzie and a bunch of stuff on it, and you can get them and restore them. I'm gonna do that too. All right, tell us. I know you were here before. We talked a little bit about NSX pre vSphere 7, and I look at the podcast number 468, which was only maybe 9 months ago or something like that, where it was pre vSphere 7. But just to recap, who are you? What do you work on out in the field? I talked a little bit about it. What did you do before you got here? Besides be a rock star, I guess.
Yeah. So what did I do before I got here? Let's see. I've done just about everything in life. I think it's one of those type of things. But along the way, I think I did. I was a VMware TAM previously to work in as an SE. So shout out to the TAM work there. But in terms of what I do, so I'm these days, actually, my title has changed. I am a staff cloud solutions engineer. So we really focused on networking and security for the network security business unit. But this really covers everything from HCX to NSX intelligence to, the myriad of different products that are out there around networking and security now. So the products, the numbers just grow, it seems like, after every acquisition, right? And we continue to have to adopt the new ones. And so the product suite at this point has changed in the last 9 months considerably. And then when you add the changes in vSphere 7, there are some huge changes that have occurred since that time.
Yeah, I look at it and I sometimes wonder, are we still a VM? Do we need to drop the V? Because really, we're still making maybe 50 or 60% of the revenue from V for sure. But it's like the portfolio is changing. There's no question about it. Right.
It's interesting you say it that way, because I've been on a lot of client calls lately, and I had a client recently sort of transparently say they were surprised to see how far we had gone away from having vSphere as a primary platform first and foremost for the new products that are coming out. So when we look at things like Cloud Health, or the Tanzu suite, right, and these sort of things. It is really amazing to see how we are focused really in terms of cloud and platform versus infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree. I'm seeing it, and sometimes I get my head hurts. I go like, can we just go back to the simple days when we just had storage, networking, and compute? Like now we have cloud health. We're acquiring security and more security, and then management of all the interconnects. It's like, and then I don't even know the company names that we did acquire. Right. So it's interesting.
So for me, is how I, in terms of how I came into VMware, I was a Cisco VAR guy, Cisco employee. Then I actually started doing work, doing vCloud Director 1.0 deployments back in the day with, vShield Edge. And if we look at how the networking has changed all the way from vCloud Director 1.0 and vShield Edge, where we did simple things like some NAT, right, or some firewalling north-south, to where today you have distributed IDS. It's incredible. It's not even the same company anymore.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so now we know kind of who you are. And if you want to hear in depth what his title is and how many things he founded, go listen to podcast number 468, because this is like an extension of that, where we talked about, geez, you co-founded a couple different orgs inside the first TAM guy, lots of stuff. So go back and listen to podcast number 468. It's not that many far back in TalkShoe. So you can go to vmw.re/pod. And go listen to all the old, I think there's a couple hundred of them back out there. So you're very credentialed. You're an innovator too. You definitely have gone out and created stuff and built stuff. So that's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
I was going to say, around the innovation piece, I'm really into the idea that not just consume, but create, right? So there's a lot of things I consume. But I feel it's really, I have to create some equal output, right, for other people as well, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to me and creating BBSs, right? Like bulletin boards in the 80s were a place where everybody could log in on their modem. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, mostly because you were just sharing, right? And you were creating value by sharing. And somehow that led me into this notion that you can create things that makes everybody's life easier, right? And sharing information just helps everybody, right? And once you get that ingrained, one day you end up as a real job doing sharing, right?
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of that, so my latest innovation, Naran, Evan Chen, and I have created this new vCommunity Metal meetup. So we've got a community that meets every Tuesday and Thursday for an hour. We have a someone come on and guest DJ their playlist of what they like. And it's really interesting in terms of sharing. So we save all the playlists to Git. We have a repo out there of everybody's playlist that comes on and plays. We've had, all sorts of people on there like Ariel and all sorts of other folks come on.
Nice.
So the really cool thing has been there are a lot of actual musicians inside of VMware and outside, I guess, affiliated somewhat loosely with, right? Third-party orgs, wherever they are, that have actually started to share their stuff between each other. And then, wait, it gets better, really sort of helping promote each other, right? Cross-promotion.
Right.
So, yeah, it's
that's
pretty
what
cool.
you start to, once you get established sharing, then you start up that stack of how do you promote sharing? The vExpert program and the blog program it's about promoting you guys, right? It's about you're building all this content, you're becoming very valuable. How do we just stand behind you and use budget and our reach to be able to promote at the same time? That's cool.
So how much budget do you have?
A lot. I have a lot. Yeah, I have a lot.
All right.
Yeah.
We have to ask for more then out there in the community.
You should. I do volunteer to pay for some stuff here and there. They have been very generous to the community, right? Like we get the best gifts. We got, we have the best parties. We have the best booth at VMworld, right? We have the best stages, the best everything, but that's, I think I spend a couple $1 million a year on all kinds of stuff that's, from the expert parties to everything.
And thank you very much for the Raspberry Pi as well, I think from last year. So.
Yeah, and then not only that, but we enable people to do that. But yeah, and then we buy stuff. We have a pretty cool thing we're trying to get done. I can't talk about it yet, but we're heading down that path So we'll see. Yeah, they haven't told me. Okay, so just to be honest, Matt, you're out there. We'll get to the topics pretty soon here, but the thing I don't know is what our Q3, Q4 budgets are going to look like. So VMware has guaranteed stable budgets for the first 2 quarters when COVID hit. So I've been able to run programs and know that I'm doing that. Now that VMworld is going online, a lot of the budget that I have for VMworld, everybody coming together, all that, I'm not sure whether they're going to come back and say, hey guys, give us back your budget, because we're not going to go to these physical events. You're not buying huge booths. You're not buying coffee for everybody. And then they did on the travel website, or the travel where you do expenses and stuff, put up a little pop-up that says, we are not buying branded gifts. All branded gifts have been suspended. So yeah, they haven't come down from a program perspective and told me this yet. So there are ways, I don't use the expense system to invoice, 400, I think it was 2,000 Raspberry Pis last year at, $50. That's like 80 grand or something for Raspberry Pis. Yeah, cool. So they haven't turned it off yet. So we'll see what we have and what we can do. It'd be fun. Okay, getting to the topic. So vSphere 7 is out. So, we have Kubernetes integration. Everybody talks about Kubernetes. Everybody talks about vSphere 7. And quietly, we talk about the network fabric that needs to be in there to do, isolation. If you're going to be starting to build Kubernetes applications, do you need that network isolation? NSX is embedded in vSphere now, right? I mean, it's just in there like the old virtual switches. Take us through narrative. What does it actually mean now that vSphere 7 is out? Did NSX get upgrades? What do we get there? And is it all Kubernetes? Is there extra things that we've done? Give us a lay of the land of vSphere 7 and NSX.
Sure. So Erik, it's really incredible when we look at the changes in vSphere 7. Significant changes around networking. So the biggest change is we've gone to a converged virtual distributed switch. So the new converged VDS basically supports the overlay. So it's a VDS with overlay capabilities. Now what that does for us is that gives us the ability to now commingle our VM workloads, our container workloads, and other type platform workloads, right? So the big change there was the converged VDS. Now, what that really did for us, though, is it gave us that common point where we can instantiate segregation of networking and segregation of security, right? So when we look at what NSX specifically does around with vSphere 7. So now you have, for example, a logical switch, right, or a virtual distributed switch. The thought thing like Kubernetes, right, and a Kubernetes cluster and containers within that, or pods and containers within that, those are going to be served by each logical segment. Now, the important part of what NSX can do in the CERT there is provide a common networking and security platform across all those environments, right? So when you look at the open source solutions, they're cobbled together out of different pieces and parts, and in different environments, they'll actually consist out of different products, right, or different projects. So this can really become an issue when you look at how do I build across multiple platforms, not just this data center, but multiple. So vSphere 7 changes that. It basically standardizes everything on the new converged virtual distributed switch, and gives us the ability to support Kubernetes as a first-class citizen, as with the VM workloads. Because the reality is, applications, even if they're developed in a modern app framework, are still going to have legacy backend resources they pull from. Other applications they have to get information from. These are going to be on virtual machines. Maybe it's some sort of web farm. Maybe it's whatever it is. Right. What are those components? And then when we think about how that actually works into the concepts of Kubernetes, with specifically Kubernetes service, right? Something off of a load balancer or an ingress controller. The thought there is what we can provide is the common platform for those load balancing and ingress controller services between your web farm with your VMs and your VM apps, as well as your modern app. right? So there's huge changes that have occurred in terms of how we can instantiate those services into vSphere 7 now.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Matt, you've been quiet.
So Eric, to that end, I'll ask you to put on your TAM hat for a minute. And let's look at this as potentially maybe not a greenfield deployment, but a brownfield deployment where I have NSX deployed, but V and not T. And I like some obviously advantages of where T is going, but let's say I'm a legacy shop and I'm looking to maybe do a conversion. What would be the advantages in moving forward with vSphere 7? How would you counsel a organization through that conversion? Is that something that they should be looking at as part of moving over to vSphere 7 on the new release?
Absolutely. So I guess without even talking about NSX V for a moment, if we just talk about looking at workloads that are on 6 going to 7, they are on a VDS, right? A virtual distributed switch. If you're in 7, so we have when we look at the example with NSX V, for example, they're going to use a distributed port group, right? Now you can have that migration of that VM simply by changing the port group backing from one to the next network. Right? Literally the changes for the migrations are that simple now, where we're just changing the backing of a VM. So when we look at how that happens, it's extremely easy to make these migration changes now. Now, I also will say when we look at the release of NSX T 3.0, 3.0 with the new migration coordinator, wow, has this really changed the ability to do migrations? Because now what you can do, we have the ability to do maintenance mode migrations, the ability to do migrations in serial or in parallel. So if you want a shorter or a longer window because of your change window, whatever these things are, to actually instantiate the constructs as well as move the workloads, right? These are now built into that product, right, at NSX T 3.0 with the migration coordinator. So if you look at the capabilities of what we've done in the recent release with vSphere 7, standardizing on the converged virtual distributed switch, as well as the improvements in NSX T 3.0 in the capabilities there for migration coordinator, as well as the other features, it's really enabled a lot of clients to say, hey, this is going to be a much easier path to take than if I had to take a bigger step between networking backends, right? Because when they're at a VDS, this is a common platform to them that they've been working with for a long time, right? So it's familiar, but at this point, we now enable that with the overlay.
Okay. And if I'm correct, no more PNICs that need to be deployed in 7. That's a limited?
That is correct. So that used to be a huge limitation because you had shops with blades, right? So most of the hardware vendors that were out there for years and years and years have been positioning blades, right? Things with 2 physical NICs in them, right? Usually at around 2 physical NICs on some sort of combo card. So if we look at what's been deployed out in the field in terms of hardware, one of the biggest design problems out there, or design constraints, I guess is a good way to say it, has been looking at how many PNICs do we need to build what type of design for things like routing. So when we look at the edge of a network and say how much needs to come in and out of the network, this is a problem when you have a limited number of NICs in servers, right? So eliminating that physical constraint at this point is huge, right? Because now NICs that maybe have a greater capability, they could be, let's say they're not 10 gig, maybe let's say they're 25 gig, 50 gig, whatever. Now you can really produce a very, strong fabric without that physical requirement.
And then as far as like third-party applications, the NSX segments, they're just presented as ordinary distributed port groups, correct?
That's correct. So it's when we look at how we've simplified this down now, even for some in Kubernetes, for example, like a namespace, the namespace, of course, is related to that distributed virtual port group, right? So the same construct is being used for the virtual machine workload as well as the container workload in Kubernetes.
And you had mentioned HCX. Is there any specific? I mean, I think HCX, ever since it come out, in a personal opinion, is just an incredible, powerful platform. It's really just something I think we're going to run with and see improvements on. Are there anything that came to the table on NSX T3.0 that helps the platform as a whole as it relates to HCX with migrating some of these workloads around?
Sure. When we look at what we're doing there in terms of with HCX, of course, is the hybrid cloud connect. So the HCX gives us the ability to provide workload mobility between sites or environments, right? The really key part, I think, when we look at 3.0 pieces there, is the ability to do these now between, for data center consolidation. So the use cases have really just increased there. You look at data center consolidation, cloud migrations. We even have clients look at things like sort of active workloads between sites and, using it to distribute workloads actively, leaving it instantiated. So there's quite a few improvements when we look at HCX out there. Here's what I will say. HCX is near and dear to my heart because it solves so many problems. When we look at clients who are, let's look at that NSX v6 instance there.
Sure.
The reality is clients, they have these old environments, these legacy environments. They're bound into these versions that can't go any further because the hardware won't allow them to upgrade. They're going to be deploying, new infrastructure for this new environment or something like that. It's going to have all new constructs. How do you get these workloads between these different environments of, different versions of vSphere, different versions of NSX, all these things, or with or without NSX, right? All those different combinations. HCX is the answer. I can't say it a better way. I introduce it to clients every day, and they are amazed by the ability just to say, you mean I can go from a really, really old 6 environment all the way to the brand new 7 environment, and there I am and I'm done. Oh yeah, by the way, you can do this with replication in advance. You can do all these other things to have a scheduled cutover for those. You could do them in batch. So when you start to look at what it provides you, and especially in today's day and age, because the race is how do I get my apps and the data as close as possible together, right? Egress charges out of cloud are huge. So when we look at companies and what they're paying, it's lots of egress charges out of these clouds for networking costs. They want to move data as close to the app as possible. When we give them the ability to move these as easy as they can from older versions of things, this is really compelling in this day and age. I can't tell you how interesting it is to have the conversation where somebody thinks it's impossible. They just think like, well, there's no way you're just moving that from there to there. And then you show them the HCX demo. Probably about 15 minutes later, they're thinking like, I can move what I want. Yes, you can. So yes, very cool stuff.
In that 6 to 7 example that you gave, is that a cold migration or is that something that could be done live?
That is a live migration. So when we look at the capabilities there, we're talking about doing, the best way to describe HCX is everybody loves what? vMotion, right? vMotion was just the rocket sauce that is, the magic is, inside of vSphere. And when we look at what HCX does, it is basically vMotion out of vSphere hosts with vSphere replication backing it, right? So you're using the same underlying technologies, right? vSphere vMotion, vSphere replication, things you know and trust and use that are actually performing these services as HCX, orchestrates and automates, right?
Sure. What other
very nice
notes from the NSX T3.0 should the average admin be aware of? What else is out there that's hidden in the release notes that, as you have seen be deployed, what are things that should be aware of? Any gotchas, any functionality that you've just really seen that went, wow, that's a great new feature set to this release?
So I love security, and one of the biggest issues we've had was microsegmentation for physical workloads, right? A physical Windows server, a physical Hadoop server, things like that, right? All these different physical servers that you're looking to be able to put the same policy, right? Distributed firewall, and then use that across for microsegmentation or segmentation by itself, right? That the ability now to just say, hey, I can put Windows physical servers in the same distributed policy that I have for my virtual machines is huge, right? I think that's a giant one. One of the ones that's like my near and dear to my heart favorite is the time-based firewall rules. So a longtime firewall admin here, can't tell you how many times I had to wake up in the middle of the night to open something and then shut it. Right? Because there's a maintenance going on, right?
Right.
Erik, so as a guy who used to do that work, okay, not waking up for 4 hours to let one port open, right? Oh, that is priceless, right? Hold on, wait, it gets better. There's more. Has auditing and logging. So I know who's logged in, what they accessed, and when it occurred, and all those good things, right? So the guys, the big brother guys in the background, they can say, okay, these things actually did or did not occur, right? And so to me, those two things are huge. I will say the big elephant there, the gorilla, is the distributed IDS, intrusion detection, right? The problem with most existing intrusion detection systems, and I ran a lot of them. I worked at the phone company. I worked at a number of very, very large networking companies. All these intrusion detection systems are boxes that they pipe the traffic back to an interface on the box, or multiple interfaces, right?
Right.
So when you start to scale this, they're just simply
you're hairpinning everything. Yep.
You're hairpinning everything, right? When you can think about the ability to do the detection of the anomaly at the hypervisor level underneath the workload that supports the workload underneath it, right? Or above it, I guess it depends on your flow of logic there. But if you think about it in terms of the hypervisor supporting that workload, and it does that detection on the actual host, and it doesn't have to send it back to a device, an appliance, those sort of things. This is a game changer, because when we look at modern applications, they are no longer built in a web farm with a web tier, app tier, DB tier. Just not happening. It exists halfway between AWS, Azure, GKE, and then some on-premises instances for some DB, right?
Yeah, it's dawning on me that one, I now start to understand the carbon black purchase, right? Like you can see, and then two, Cisco is going to be in trouble, right? Because this is moving as vSphere 7 comes out with the new features. This turns into like, not just for my VMs anymore. This is your whole network fabric. This is going to be the center point, and you really are going to have a full SDN, all software controlled, security, access, microsegmentation. It all comes together here, right?
Yeah, no, they've had a problem, I think, for a while now. So as soon as we went to acquire VMware SD-WAN, right, and those pieces, that completed the entire, WAN to LAN, right? That's the whole piece. So when we add NSX Advanced Load Balancer, Avi Networks, right? When we think about Avi is the only load balancer that is available in every public cloud today. And yes, Alibaba. I mean, it's not just the big three, it's everywhere. So when you have your global company and your global app that's truly running out of a global cloud fabric, I think everybody's in trouble. That's why I've been here for so long, Erik.
Yeah. I got to say, Raghu and the product strategy guys at VMware just keep calling it. right? Just keep moving it forward. And there's been so much noise about Kubernetes, right? That it used to be, the noise used to be NSX, right? And this was the narrative that we're going to be taking over the Cisco switch business, right? It's all going to go virtual, just like we virtualized everything in compute. We're going to virtualize everything in network. And it was there. It was a hot topic for about 3 or 4 years. Then along came DevOps and everything else, Puppet Chef, Jenkins, and automation, and developers started. And they kind of took the news, and quietly we've just been consuming the network functions, right? And then putting this together quietly.
Yeah, well, it's in some cases quietly, in some cases not so quietly. And I'll say the case that's not so quietly is, Tanzu service mesh, right? So my good buddy, Naran Evan-Chen, he's out there in the field doing his best to make sure people are aware of that. And that is truly, when I look at the future state, right? When we talk about what is being positioned, this is the game changer, Erik. So here's why. Right now, everybody has different infrastructure backing these different environments, right? Some have, look at this, you could have NSX in one, Illumio in the next, ACI, Cisco ACI in the next. Now, what happens when these, Kubernetes endpoints are into all these different infrastructures? That's what Tanzu Service Mesh solves. It abstracts the infrastructure altogether and says, I'm just going to deal with the services, right?
Right.
And between those services. So I think this is the real game changer. It's an abstraction to the abstraction.
Right. It's funny because when you say Tanzu Service Mesh, I quickly go to microservices and how to build the app, right? You don't think, actually, this is just a really cool name for NSX global SDN strategy that allows you to manage all the endpoints, right? But the reality is that's what Tanzu Service Mesh is. It's a fancy name for a network fabric that's based on SDN. Right.
Yeah. Well, network and security. So remember, the big piece there is we're doing identity, and then we're doing encryption of that as well, right? Authorization, authentication, all those pieces, right? So when we look at the ability to join an AWS Lambda service to an on-premises, Kubernetes service to another cloud service in GKE, for example, there is no other solution. They're going to do this. The reason is Kubernetes works off of namespaces. Tanzu Service Mesh provides a global namespace that binds all those other local namespaces. So now you truly have a global fabric, right?
Yeah, there was a great light board a woman did that kind of showcased this, and our approach to networking in Kubernetes, right, and naming. It was actually really compelling that you're taking it to the next level of thought when you lay things out this way versus the Kubernetes people that kind of built it for Google and it kind of bounced around, but nobody really looked at it from an enterprise multi-cloud. This is how the real world operates. Yeah.
And so that's the thing is, and I'll say this, I was a developer in a previous life. Developers have a religious conviction towards one way or the other in terms of open source, and it's really to their own detriment. I was one of these people, actually. Good book, The Cathedral and the Bazaar by Erik Raymond, right? Sort of sums this up, right? But the problem for the developer is this. He wants control of these things, but in the end, he doesn't really want to maintain them. He wants to build his app because that's what he's responsible for. But on the other hand, if I have to manage IP tables on hosts in my code, oh man, is this a pain?
As all of us who have written code, right, we get excited about it until it's done. Then we're like, okay, my job is to write new code. So, and as you mature, you realize you need to address this stuff up front. You need to address, how am I going to hand this off so I don't have to get calls or deal with routing tables at 3 a.m, right? When they need to open up a port.
I had a great conversation with some developers. There was a Russian lad there. We were talking about, Tanzu Kubernetes Grid and Service Mesh as well. And he said, well, I can run Istio on my own. I can do what I want. I have sidecars. I know what's happening. And I said, okay, great. Do you wear a pager? And he said, no, why? He said, no, why? Yeah. I said, well, you're gonna end up wearing one if you do that. Because none of your operations people can get to a sidecar or would know what to do if they were in one. Okay,
Right.
Mixer, if you have ever logged into Mixer and seen what is inside Mixer, it is, and I've been doing networking a long time, it's crazy. Okay, so go check out those products and see if you're going to get your operations staff to go do that. It's not a trivial thing. This is non-trivial.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we forget about this piece that operations people are good, right? Because you only have so much time in the day to deal with this stuff, and you don't want to be pegged, worrying about this. So even though you have religion kind of goes out the window when you start talking about mowing my grass every day, right? Like you just don't want to have to do that every day.
Yeah.
You want to outsource that. You want to get other people operations because you're going to focus on what you want to build, right? So this makes sense. Yeah, love it. And I gotta say that if I were Cisco, I would be worried, right? I would just be worried because and it seems to be accelerating, and we're putting the pieces there to make this all come true, right? Another thing that somebody, I had this on the agenda. Then I'll maybe pass it back to Matt. He can ask whatever he wants, but I'll throw this out to you. Like I saw this. Somebody, I don't know who, I don't want to throw them out, but it was somebody from IBM who was, worked at Red Hat and went, oh yeah, VMware, you totally don't need them, right? Like we've got this, we're on top of this. We can run Kubernetes on Red Hat, and they weren't looking at this level at all. They just kind of just don't pay attention. And I'm wondering, is this because they're just not really in the enterprise app business, or they don't have it, so they're going to overshadow it? I mean, isn't that like a bad statement?
Well, it's just ignoring the problem, right? It's just saying, well, I can't address it, so I'm ignoring it. But I will say this, I have actually gone into clients and seen they've done an OpenShift deployment, and they had deployed NSXT for their OpenShift deployment. And they said, well, this is going to make it easier for us. Right. And so I was like, okay, so they literally came and deployed it because it made it easier for them, right?
Well, and there is this separation between networking and the rest of your application where that's okay. That part we can have, that's VMware, but it's not virtual machines. That's a networking fabric, which is part of our business, kind of like AirWatch. We have a lot of businesses that are no longer dependent on you putting your workload on a VM, right?
That's right.
So it is interesting. Matt, I'm just wondering, do you any thoughts around these topics? I'll just give you a moment.
So just within the last couple of weeks, and Eric, I realize this is potentially outside of your realm of expertise, but the Octarian acquisition, how does this play into all that? Or how do you see that particular product suite playing in to what is our current security portfolio?
I've really been focused in a different area lately altogether. So I've been sort of isolated, almost in a cave, hyper focused on a single area right now for something internal. So
is it something you could share?
So I can't say yet, but there's definitely things going to be changing in our solutions. When we look around, the new NSX intelligence and how we're actually positioning things there. So a lot of work being done there. Just know that there's a lot of good things coming.
Sounds like some interesting developments in that arena.
Yeah. So, I do want to mention this. I have a whole bunch of people that use all sorts of different automation pieces for NSX. We have out there now in terms of NSX T3.0, just to put that out there, a lot of people aren't aware. There is a new Terraform provider. So if you're using Terraform, as well as things like VRA, so we have a VRA plugin for Terraform, as well as people just using Terraform natively. So there's a new provider out there, as well as an Ansible module. So a lot of people who are doing multi-network stack. And it's interesting, I notice network DevOps types will tend to gravitate towards Ansible a lot because they'll use it for different solutions, right? So just to put that awareness out there, that Ansible module upgrade is out there and available in 3.0.
Nice. So switch gears a little bit here. It was on my topic list, which I'm always interested to hear about, which is as this workload consolidates into one admin, it used to be a storage admin, a network admin, a compute admin. Are we actually seeing that happen when it comes to networking, or are the networking admins starting to just become SDN admins, and they'll still have a role for the network administrator, but they're just going to be doing it virtually? Or is this really coming together into one team?
I think I guess the shops that are further down the road, it is becoming one team. I have seen that quite frequently recently, where there is someone on the team who has complete access to all production network and this and that, and they can implement change according to change control and policy,
Yeah,
but
sure.
they have that in a team, like a squad format, right?
Right.
So there are the newer sort of further down the road shops that are out there. Then there's a lot of awareness. I'll say the majority of shops out there that are sort of still siloed are very aware that they're siloed, and they are looking at how do we cross silos, right? What's interesting is a lot of the new enhancements we're making when we look at integration between these products, where DevOps is working so closely now
Right.
with the IT admin. So if we think about something like Kubernetes and vSphere 7, right? To the IT admin, he's still doing the existing infrastructure pieces he's doing within vSphere. However, the DevOps engineer is now using kubectl against a master on a vSphere host, right? So
Yep.
yeah, it's really, I think shops are starting to see, I see a lot of the DevOps teams now sitting very close, even on Zoom, right, to the infrastructure guys.
Yeah, the
right?
infrastructure compute
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering. I definitely see that happening, right? As this moves, because as you're starting to build the apps too, and you have CI/CD, or what a CI, continuous development, or
Continuous integration, continuous
Yeah,
integration, continuous development.
continuous deployment. That whole model means that you're not going to file a ticket for a new network change. You're not going to file a ticket for storage, and you're going to have to work with the DevOps guys or even the developers, right? Like everybody's going to come closer and closer. And if you look at the way the network was isolated and siloed, 10 years ago or 8 years ago when we acquired NSX, and everybody said this is going to be impossible, the network guys are never going to come. That has started to happen now, right? And I could see that happening with the developers as well.
It happens out of 3 reasons, right? But they're all based on demand and need, right? And so it's interesting because when we look at like the recent events with, the pandemic, I have seen companies who normally would say, we can't do this because security says no, or this says no, or they say no, or somebody says no, to there's a bottom line need, we have to do it now, we're doing it now, right? So there has been big change recently in mindset, I think, because what they have found, I had a client deploy an entire set of virtual load balancers, NSX advanced load balancers, literally in 48 hours, over a weekend to get 8,000 employees in, like literally overnight, right?
Right.
They green lighted that change that fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was none of this, I'm going to wait for whatever.
Yeah, this has changed things. It's kind of like the executive learning that you don't have to commute to work every day, right? Like before this happened, executives like, no, we want everybody in the office. It's really going to be productive. We just like it this way. And all of a sudden, when you're forced to do it, everybody's like, oh, that actually works. This is working.
Yeah, and so how that plays over to the development instance, or that use case, they have the same need, right? And you reach this point in business where the business simply says, I need the app to do this to be competitive. So I can stay competitive in business. I need this feature on the app. My devs say they need to be able to put this out, and these things get pushed through. I have seen more times than not when we start doing network design and security design meetings, where normally only the network and security team would be invited to these design meetings. They're inviting the DevOps teams now, because they know that if they cannot meet their requirements first, there's no sense in even starting the design for anything else. It has to come first now.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Matt.
So Erik, if someone would want to learn more about this and follow along with your blog or your Twitter feed, how would they do that? What's your Twitter handle out there?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is my first name, last name, right? So ErikHinderer. That's Erik Hinderer on Twitter. On the blogs, I can be found at nsxninjas.com. I can be found at virtuallyred.com. So the Ninjas is the podcast. The blog is the old school written blog. Although I've really switched over to YouTube format lately, just recording things, right? Because
Yep, as we have, right? It's just it works.
yeah, like written is great, and I think there's people that probably are still consuming that to some degree, right?
Right.
But when people can search a video on YouTube and actually see you do the thing, that's the magic. Like not just seeing the
Yeah, it's
pictures or the
beautiful.
screenshots, but actually see you go there, do this, do that.
It's funny that way. This is an aside again, but it's like when my wife asks me anything now, I just go, did you look YouTube? Just go look on YouTube. There's going to be how to harvest your XYZs, how to do anything, how to do everything, right?
Hold
like,
on. So
anything.
I've got basically a Pi that runs Pi-hole, and every once in a while I'll put in different things like YouTube to block my son, right? When he's supposed to be doing work, or my daughter. Right. So I go up there today. He's on the iPad, and I've got it blocked, but he's watching YouTube, and I'm like, how do you do this? So I go back down to the firewall, and I'm looking, and I'm like, he is not connected to any address at YouTube. So I go back up, and I look again, and I'm like, all right, dude, tell me what you did. And he's like, well, I watched a YouTube video, and I found out about an internet proxy. I was just like,
right. He's going through Russia. Right.
I was just defeated by YouTube, Erik. Literally.
Yeah. And everything is captured. So that's cool that you're doing that. So you're on what's the channel? Where do you go? What is that again? Say it one more time.
I'm on nsxninjas.com, virtually read, READ. Like I almost virtually read it. And on YouTube, it's just my name, right? Erik Hinderer. So,
all right, so just search for Erik Hinderer. Yeah. That's great because Matt, that was a good question out there because we're coming up to the top of the hour. That is the fastest hour I've ever seen. The cool thing is YouTube gives us the video drop-offs, right? Do you want to hear the percentage of people that make it to the end of the podcast? The last 8 minutes of the podcast, we drop down to like 7% of all the viewers. But this is the video. That's the YouTube video. People don't sit and watch hour-long YouTube videos. But we just do it for fun so people can see us. You can go get the audio on iTunes. Just search for VMware Community Podcasts and you'll find it. And then you can just listen to it on your phone. On commute, nobody's commuting, but when they do commute again, people will be able to listen to us. We still get a couple thousand a week coming downloading off podcasts, so that's good. And we're back up to this. This one's going to be very popular, so we'll be at 5,000 or 6,000.
Oh boy,
you're rocking, man.
All right. Well, Erik and Matt, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate the time. Yeah,
I appreciate it too. Thanks a lot. To follow up, we'll do 30-second vBarbecue report. I did some tri-tip, but Erik, barbecue, what do you got to share with us old time for barbecue?
So there was a lot of barbecue going on with Memorial Day weekend, right? So I had a lot of neighbors talking about their barbecue. And they all would come over and say, hey, I'm barbecuing this or I'm barbecuing that. And I had to explain to them, you're grilling. Barbecuing is more than 3 meats at a time. So my grandmother used to believe that a barbecue was not actually a barbecue unless you were doing 3 meats or more. So everybody who's out there, you need to up your
grandmother's wise. That's just super wise. Like,
so listen, Tim Davis and all you guys out there.
Channel. Because the YouTube channel vBarbecue was just about, we did this for the vExperts. Everybody came together and we just chatted and ate barbecue. It was about the community. It's about, if you're just barbecuing one meat, you're not doing enough. It's not a barbecue.
It's a grill.
I'm going to put that on. I'm going to put it on a channel in the description. 3.
I think Erik just set our first vBarbecue profile requirements. 3 meats or greater.
I think so.
Yeah.
Now, Erik, does that mean you can kill it all up with one stone with a turducken?
No. So I don't care what the 3 meats are, right? They could be shrimp, bacon, and pork. It could be, I don't care, but there has to be 3 meats. You should have a brisket, pulled pork, ribs. I don't know, something, but 3 meats, come on.
That is beautiful. Tony Foster, we're going to give you an objective for next week. I know we have somebody coming on from Europe that's going to be talking about one of their blogs for vMotion and a couple other cool things. But Eric, not Eric, sorry, Tony Foster, your job is to go do a 3-meat barbecue and get that thing on Twitter, because we need you, Tony Foster, to be the barbecue man. And now the bar has been raised. It's a 3-meat requirement.
Challenge accepted.
There you go.
So Tony,
Eric,
I want you to at me on Twitter. Make sure you at me on Twitter on that one, and I'll have my grandma's picture up there yelling at you with a meme.
Just so people know, it's ERIK.
Yes.
Or ERIK.
ERIK. My mother wanted me to be special. She told me that Erik with a C was generic, and Erik with a K was like special K.
I'm Nordic, and my family's from Denmark, Copenhagen, and I want to kill my parents for using the C, right? Because all good Nords use the K. So there you go. With that, we're done. Everybody have a great week. It's the summertime. Get out, get your hands dirty, breathe some of that fresh air. It's good for your lungs. Until then, we'll see you again next week. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
See you guys.